Well, it's Ryder Lyons commitment time, and apparently we should not feel good.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So, is Oregon's NIL strategy shifting? What's the floor for the team this year? That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, dropping this show a little bit earlier than normal because Oregon's waiting to hear some big news today. We don't know the exact time, but five-star quarterback Ryder Lyons is set to commit. And the expectation from industry experts like Steve Wiltfong that he's going to BYU. Now, I've texted a couple people on the matter. I have also heard BYU feels really confident. Now, I think most schools would say they feel confident going into a kid's recruitment when you're essentially down into the final two. I'm sure Oregon felt really good about their chances to land Jared Curtis. In fact, I know they did, because since then, it has been a scramble. They put a lot of eggs into that basket, understandably so. Jared Curtis could have been the next Justin Herbert at Oregon, Josh Allen at Wyoming. I think he can be that sort of player. And after that happened, Oregon was suddenly put in a position of, we got to find a quarterback. And there immediately came a crystal ball from Steve Wiltfong, who, of course, now thinks he's going over to BYU, that Ryder Lyons was going to wind up at Oregon. And he was a USC favorite for a long time. He's from Folsom, California. But this has seemingly whittled down to be between Oregon and BYU. By the time you're listening to or watching this show, he may already have committed. Tomorrow's show, I'll have the reaction to that, of course, because that's the way we roll here at the Locked On Network. But I would really like Oregon to get Ryder Lyons. Do I think that the recruiting class is defined with him? No. I don't think that he is as impactful for the 2026 class, not because he is, essentially a 27 recruit, given that he's expected to take a one-year LDS mission and show up on campus to whichever college he chooses in the year 2027. I think that he is not the singularly most impactful recruit that Oregon is going after now. In the class of 2026, he's up there. Make no mistake about it. I don't want to downplay, I like Curtis more than Lyons, and I never wanted to give off the perception that, I guess we'd have to settle for Ryder Lyons. Like, no, Ryder Lyons is stud. Or if they don't get Lyons, am I going to be disappointed? Yes. Will I be at the same level as Jared Curtis? No, I really won't. Because Oregon has also positioned themselves for two other quarterbacks potentially in the class of 2026. So I want to talk about them a little bit today. In the event that Ryder Lyons winds up picking BYU, it's not a traditional recruit. It would kind of remind me of losing out on Teteroa McMillan down to Arizona. There can just be a lot of factors at play, and sometimes a school, on paper, punches above its weight. And if BYU, however the recruitment goes down, I have no idea what's exactly happening behind the scenes. Brian says he's Brian Smith, who comes on the show regularly. My everydayers know that. He says he seems like a really, really good kid, good head on his shoulders, and is not making decisions for the wrong reasons, that he's making them for the right reasons. If he winds up picking BYU, yeah, on paper, that's punching above their weight. Welcome to the new world of college football. Schools can do things they didn't traditionally do. Texas Tech has a top 5 transfer portal class in college football for the class of 2025. Texas Tech, that has not won. I don't think they've won a Big 12 championship in my lifetime. I apologize if they have not, but they just have always been really good, but they've never exactly been great. Their last Big 12 conference title came in 1994. So yeah, I was not born. Again, not trying to take a shot at Texas Tech, but anyway, I'm just saying there are schools that are shifting the narrative with regards to who they can recruit, who they can go out and get. And if Oregon misses out on Ryder Lyons because he winds up going to BYU, it would be the Teteroa McMillan situation. Did Oregon's recruiting crater Did it tank? Did they fail to get talented players? Did they not get talented receivers after that happened? No. It was just they missed out on a guy who went on to have a great college career and I think can wind up having a great NFL career as well. I feel that way about Ryder Lyons. So yeah, I really like for Oregon to go out and get him. But, based on what I've been told and what people like Steve Wiltfong have said, the expectation is he's going to go to BYU. So at this point, it feels kind of like an added bonus. But I want to talk about the other two guys because Matt Ponatoski was the first quarterback that popped up on the Oregon radar on the trail after Jared Curtis committed to Georgia. Bryson Beaver has been balling out at some camps recently and just, I keep seeing his name and hearing his name all over the place. Either one of those guys would be the equivalent of Austin Novosad. You might feel, because he doesn't have an extra star next to his name on a recruiting profile, like it's a consolation prize. In reality, any one of these guys can wind up being good starting quarterbacks one day. I think that's how we all feel about Austin Novosad, right? What was your first impression of him when Dante Moore committed to UCLA and you wound up with Novosad? Was it something along the lines of, well, at least we got somebody? Now you see who that somebody is. We haven't seen him in game action consistently, admittedly. We've seen the throws he can make in the spring game, though. Dude has got special arm talent. Accuracy, pinpoint accuracy, elite. That dude is an elite thrower of the ball. And so, if Oregon doesn't get, would I rather have Ryder Lyons than Bryson Beaver or Matt Ponatoski? Yeah, I would, because he has a higher ceiling. But would either of those guys be, someone I look at as, it's a positional placeholder? No, absolutely not. They've got a solid lineup of schools that are going after them for a reason. One of you sent in a question whether they would take Ponatoski and Beaver. Whether they would take Lyons and either Ponatoski or Beaver, or basically, could they wind up with two quarterbacks since Ryder Lyons is essentially 2027? I think is it technically possible? Yes. Would it be unprecedented? No. I'm sure it wouldn't be. Classes have had two quarterbacks before. I think Oregon's had classes with two quarterbacks, and as I mentioned, there's a staggering of the years in there. So I don't think that they would. I don't think that they need to. If you don't get Ryder Lyons and you wind up getting either Ponatoski or Beaver, you're still doing fine at quarterback. If you go 0 for 3, as I've discussed before, you're still fine at quarterback. You might need to go to the portal, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be for a starting quarterback one day. Because of the way they've recruited this position and set themselves up for the next several years, this staff has the ability to operate successfully within a range of outcomes on the recruiting front when it comes to quarterbacks. So I'd love for him to get Ryder Lyons. At this point, I'd be not shocked, not surprised, but I am not expecting, based on the information I've gotten, for Oregon to go out there and get him. I sure hope that they do. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. NIL is always a conversation with Oregon, and I must say I appreciate that the unlimited NIL and Oregon being the NIL boogeyman in college sports is really starting to cool down, because it was always dumb. It was always ridiculous. However, one of you sent me a great question about it anyway, and it does merit discussion. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, which I love watching, golf on the green, which I love playing and watching, or high-stakes soccer action, which I'm also down for, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why would you not make it a little more thrilling? That just makes perfect sense to anybody. And so with FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. If you want to bet something related to Oregon, for instance, you can do all of those things. They are minus 320 to win 10 or more games. That's a lot of confidence in Dan Lanning and company. I'm going to be talking about that later on today's show. You can bet their win total is 10.5. You can bet their conference title odds, national title odds. Both are top 5 and 3 respectively. You can do all of that over at FanDuel. So go check them out if you have not already. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, who doesn't love a good NIL discussion? So, Sir RoboDuck sent this one in. You can send YouTube comments, Twitter, become a Locked On Ducks Insider, get priority access, and a bunch of other perks as well. You can send in questions. You can send in takes for Spencer's Scale of Agreement. I'm having a lot of fun with that, I tell you. Sir RoboDuck sends this one in. And perhaps this is even more relevant, again, depending on when you listen to or watch the show with regards to Ryder Lyons. Being second shows we have a plenty competitive NIL. Agree. It's been clear our NIL focus is on player retention as opposed to overpaying for high school players, which is why Dan has never lost a player from the two deep to the portal. We're likely going to land Iheanacho, Jet Washington, etc. This came in before Jet Washington committed late on Thursday night, 5-star safety. He's now one of the most prized commits in the 2026 class for the Ducks. So I can independently confirm that Oregon has just completely revamped their NIL strategy, that they are, more focused on player retention. I don't know that there was ever a shift. I don't know that Oregon ever wasn't focused on player retention. So a narrative that has correctly emerged, or not emerged like in the last couple months, but in the lead up to the national championship game and in the months that followed, people like Joel Klatt pointed out that Ohio State spent a lot of their NIL on player retention, keeping them out of the portal and also keeping them out of the NFL draft. And that was a big reason why they won. That in addition, of course, to paying top dollar to get high-profile prospects like their quarterback, Will Howard, their running back, Quinshon Judkins, their safety, Caleb Downs. They're not winning the national championship, but they don't get those guys. They still would have been good, but they had to go out and get them in the portal, of course. So the retention narrative is one that I talked about with regards to Oregon last season because it did, in fact, exist. The similarities between Oregon and Ohio State were plentiful, and the player retention was one of those things. And Dan Lanning has stated repeatedly and with pride, and there are just not that many high-level programs that can say this. I mean, some of the best programs in the country can't say this. Georgia just lost its quarterback to the portal. He's down at Miami now. Like you can look all over the place at high-profile examples. I mean, Alabama lost their 5-star stud safety. Where? Ohio State. It happens. Now, there was a coaching change that might have influenced that, but still. Oregon last season had Terrence Ferguson return for a fourth year of college football. He just got taken in the second round. He didn't have to do that. He might have helped his draft stock a little. He was going to get taken. Maybe he moved himself up around by coming back. He wasn't going past the third. His draft profile didn't radically shift from 1 year to the next. It might have gone up, but it did. He didn't emerge as like, oh my gosh, who's this guy? No, the NFL community knew who Terrence Ferguson was. Jeffrey Bossa came back. Johnny Cornelius came back. Tez Johnson came back. Dylan Gabriel didn't go to the NFL. He came to Oregon instead. I think this has been a consistent part of the NIL approach at Oregon and is part of the reason, not entirely, but it is a factor that you have to be able to, you have to present as an option to kids as, hey, you stay here, we're going to take care of you, and we've got a plan for what your path to playing time looks like and how you're going to help us go out and win a championship. But with regards to, the focus is on retention now compared to overpaying for high school players, I don't think that Oregon's approach to NIL on the high school trail has necessarily changed either. I think they've always been, because they have never had unlimited NIL. I think that's well established at this point based on, actual reporting or just the facts that we see as outsiders to the program. But, that narrative's still foreign, whatever. But it was always ridiculous. And so over the last couple of years, you can find a number of examples. Heck, Nico Iamaleava went to Tennessee for a reported $8 million NIL contract over the course of his entire career. He's, of course, at UCLA now making less money because they way overplayed their hand in that situation. But that to me is consistent. Jackson Cantwell went for a good amount of NIL down to Miami. I don't begrudge the Hurricanes for doing that. Cantwell is one of the most college-ready offensive tackles in recent memory, according to Brian Smith. I don't begrudge them for doing that. But I don't think it's some new phenomenon that, Oregon's willing to come in second more often because they don't want to give big NIL dollars. Maybe that's what happened with Richard Wesley. I don't know that personally. You can theorize and connect the dots, and it could easily be true, but I'm not going to sit here and say that's 100% what happened when I haven't been told that that's the case. So I think that Oregon's NIL efforts have always helped with player retention. I think that should be a huge focus. However, I'm not someone that's in the category of, if somebody wants a lot of NIL, it means you shouldn't recruit them out of high school. No, put talent on the roster. Unless you're worried about what it's going to mean culturally for the locker room, then don't go down that particular avenue. But go get as many talented players as you can. Hot take. I know. I keep repeating that incredibly hot take. Jeremy sends this one, and hey, Spence, just saw this, had to share for a potential mailbag question comment. Apparently, the Kenny Wheaton has his son in the 2026 recruiting cycle. 3-star quarterback out of Allen, Texas, named Kai Wheaton. He's officially declared his commitment to the Oregon State Beavers, the son of the pick playing in Corvallis. If ever there was an argument for keeping the Civil War game going, it's the chance to see the son of Kenny Wheaton, the man who single-handedly shifted Oregon's fate in '94 in that timeless moment, fact check true, getting blown out on Rich Book's Field dressed in black and orange, a field in Oregon's home stadium named after an Oregon State alumni. The headlines write themselves. Thoughts? I was actually talking about this recently with someone. The Oregon State-Oregon rivalry is so different than Oregon-Washington. The number of intertwined... Mike Parker is the longtime radio voice of the Oregon State Beavers. He was a Duck. There are, Duck things named after Beaver people, Beaver things named after Duck people, Ducks who have been hired to be Beavers, Beavers have been hired. You would never see this in Oregon, Washington. This would not, absolutely, positively would not happen. So I was a little surprised, given that Achilles Smith Jr. is on the roster, that Kenny Wheaton's son winds up playing at Oregon State. Is Kenny Wheaton going to wear orange and black? Man, that'd be a strange sight. That would be a strange... I wish Kai Wheaton all the best. I think Oregon State is capable of building a solid program. I think they're starting to invest in it the way they need to be competitive. Their head coach, we don't really know yet. Defensive guy, Trent Bray, I think he can be good. They will be a much improved team this year when they come to Autzen Stadium. Kai Wheaton's a 2026 recruit, though. And my initial reaction was, man, how did Oregon miss that guy? Perhaps the pitch, I know there was, a pitch was of course made. I'm sure he looked and thought about Oregon. I think the biggest difference is, Wheaton's not a super highly rated recruit. Doesn't mean he isn't a good football player. I haven't studied his film or anything like that. Playing in Oregon secondary, getting snaps there, a lot more difficult than Oregon State's. A lot more difficult. So just my guess, not reporting anything, just a hunch as to why or how he wound up there. I'd admit that was a pretty strong selling point from Trent Bray and company is, hey, you're a talented kid. You have to go through a lot over there. We've got some good players, but you don't have as many obstacles to seeing the field, especially earlier in your career. That'd be my guess. And obviously he wanted to play in the state of Oregon. But again, I think Trent Bray can be a solid coach. We'll just have to wait and see. So there was a question in there. The headlines do write themselves, but I don't want to keep the Civil War going just to stick it to Kai Wheaton. No, I don't. Wish the kid all the best. And I hope Oregon wins that game every time it gets played. So, what's the floor for this Oregon team? That's coming up next. You have any idea how close we are to the season? I mean, really, honestly, legitimately close to Oregon playing a new college football game. It always goes faster than I think. Time flies when you're having fun. I certainly have fun doing this show, and I thank you all for being here. And we're just over 2 months from Oregon's game. Skirt Mayo sent this question in. Spencer, I've been an Oregon fan for 17 years. Good run. That's good. You and I have, I got you by a few years, but not many. But that's also because I'm just not that old, as those watching on YouTube can see. Babyface. All right. I think this year's team has talent, but it's unproven. I'm at 9.5 on Spencer's scale of agreement with that sentence. Feels more like a rebuilding year than a reloading year. Is it crazy for me to think that 8-4 or 9-3 is a realistic expectation? I just think there's too much hype for the kind of team Oregon has this year. Please prove me wrong. Well, the comment section might be more well suited to prove you wrong than me. However, I think 9-3, barring, a lot of injuries, like a Utah level of injuries. There was a season, I can't remember if it was this past year or the year before, Utah had, it was 2023. In 2023, Utah had a comedy of errors season when it comes to injuries because the lineup of guys that weren't available to play was insane, number one. It started with their quarterback, Cam Rising. It didn't end there, though. And it got so bad that I think the guy's name was Sione Vaki, was playing safety and running back. Not because he really, really wanted to. He really, really had to. He was their starting running back and their starting safety. Now, Charles Nelson played both ways for the Ducks back in, the 20, like on that 2015 team with Vernon Adams that would have gone to the playoff if he hadn't gotten hurt. I will die on that hill. They would have gone 11-1, made the Pac-12 championship game, beat whoever they play. They would have gone to the play. If he hadn't gotten hurt, they might have beaten Michigan State, been 12-0. That team was so good. It was so good, and he got hurt. The backup quarterback plan was not as strong. Anyway, Charles Nelson started playing safety partially out of necessity. I don't think Oregon will ever get to that point. I hope they wouldn't. But that's what it would take for me to feel okay about an 8-4, 9-3 campaign. I think 9-3 is the floor. And I don't know where 8-4 would come from. Lose to Penn State, lose to Iowa, lose to Washington, one of USC and Indiana at home. I guess. I don't know. I'm curious. Like, you can talk about records in theoretical terms really easily. Because frankly, my instinct is to pick Oregon to go 9-3 or maybe 8-4. But what you have to consider is their schedule is incredibly favorable. And you have a coach in Dan Lanning who has gotten better as a head coach and whose staff has gotten better each year he has been there. In 23, they were better than 22. In 24, they were better than 23. There are a lot of examples that prove that particular point. Now, is this year's team as good as last year? No. But when you couple a continuously improving coaching staff with a really talented roster that, yes, is indeed unproven and will what? Oh, that's right, get to kind of ease their way into things. Now, that's dependent upon what Oklahoma State winds up being this year. Because ordinarily, Oklahoma State is a team I'd circle on the schedule and say, that's someone you need to be wary of. Whether you're at Autzen or especially if you're in Stillwater, be careful with the Cowboys. They're off their worst season. And I'll get Cody Stovall of Locked On Cowboys on here at some point for a crossover and we can hash all this stuff out. They're usually a team that's going to be good. Last season, they were terrible. They're coming to Autzen. Winning at Autzen, very difficult. Very difficult. Only one team has done it, and it was Michael Penix and the receivers in 2022. And oh, by the way, it doesn't happen if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt. So that's what it took for Oregon to lose at Autzen Stadium under Dan Lanning. The national champions couldn't beat Dan Lanning last year. His team is not as good as last year. However, it's still really talented, and there is not a team as good as last year's Ohio State or anything close to it that's going to roll through Autzen Stadium this year. So when you look at the home games, Indiana and USC, maybe Wisconsin could sneak up on you. Maybe. I saw Billy Edwards Jr., the former Maryland quarterback, come to Autzen last year with a kind of average-ish team. It didn't go very well for him. And we'll see where the secondary's at. But, the advantage for Oregon this year is in the schedule because you start Montana State, Oklahoma State, at Northwestern, Oregon State. You're going to be favored in all of those games. You should win all of those games. Maybe one of them winds up being close, but no more than one of them should be close based on the talent on paper that is there. And you get to kind of work out the kinks of all the new players that I've talked about for the last several months here on the show, including, but not limited to, Dante Moore. So what I encourage you to go do is, if you're saying, well, 8-4, 9-3 expectation, if you want to say the floor is 8-4, I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm not there. I'm not, because Oregon has been so dominant at home and that home field advantage isn't going anywhere. I think the floor is 9-3. I think the ceiling is 11-1. Could I see 12-0? Not really. No. I think that's expecting too much. So I think Oregon is going to win somewhere between 11 and 9 games. That's my expectation. Could that slip down and be 8? Yeah, that'd be pretty disappointing. But again, find me the losses. And yeah, you can say going on the road to Washington in a rivalry game is going to be hard. Going on the road to Iowa and Kinnick Stadium for the first time is not going to be easy. Going on the road to Penn State, you're probably losing that football game. You should lose that football game. So that's one loss, but you got to find me the other 3 to get to 8-4, because that's where I just struggle. If you had last year's schedule and this year's team, I think 8-4 could be on the table, because going to Michigan, not an easy thing to do. Ohio State, this year's Oregon team against last year's Ohio State team, that's probably a loss. And that Wisconsin game, you're playing your 8th straight game. It was on the road. This year's Dylan Gabriel found a way to win that game. Can Dante Moore? Yeah, that's a much tougher task. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about the schedule, though, kind of where your expectations are at. But I think an 8.5 win. I'd set the win at 8, or the floor at 8.5 wins if I could. But because of the schedule, I'd put it at 3. If you had a different schedule, I would put the floor, not my prediction, the floor at 8 wins. But I do think it's 9, because eventually they're going to start figuring things out. And they'll go to Penn State. They'll probably lose the game. And then they'll get a bye, come back home. Maybe Indiana trips them up. But I think Indiana's a pullback team. I don't think USC is ready to be great yet. Wisconsin, we'll see. And, they've got a couple other random games. Maybe Rutgers pulls the upset. Oregon's got to go to Piscataway. That's a long trip. Maybe something crazy like that happens. But I think something really unexpected, which does happen in college football, would have to take place for Oregon to go 8-4. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.